Who the hell's leaving me a voicemail at this time?
Hey buddy, listen, I can't produce the Doom Report anymore. I have to go on a trip, just look at some farm property in the south? Yeah, south of here. Anyways, might not see you for a while, or like ever, but I've really been, it's been, I don't want to say an honor, or, well, it's been fine. It's been fine. Yeah, it's been good even. I'll really miss aspects of the show. But there is something I need to tell you, Nick. Everyone is...
What the double-decker fuck? Man, this is bullshit. I'm gonna keep pissing in people's Cheerios without a base of operations.
The universe will provide. We'll find an even better garage, one with even more spiders.
Live, laugh, love. Bullshit, Brian. The universe doesn't give a shit about that. Hey, Bri, I gotta go. Say hi to Pants for me.
Asmodeus, Satanas, Lucifer.
Brent Hemuth? Producer?
Yeah, buddy. I'll be taking care of all your production needs from now on.
Are you the new Sam?
Oh, don't worry about Sam. Sam's good, Nick. Sam's at peace.
Welcome, children of the grave, to another depressing episode of the Doom Report, where we drink whiskey and scream at the night sky, challenging God to a knife fight at the CVS parking lot. With this two-part series, we'll be exploring the ongoing fuckery of COVID-19.
1, 2, COVID's coming for you. 3, 4, don't go out your door. 5, 6, check the statistics. 7, 8, better vaccinate. 9, 10, never breathe again.
Well, wasn't that adorable and bone-chilling? Seems to coincide with the type of day I've been having. Anyway, my fellow carbon-based life forms, it is now time for us to dive into the spiked ball pit that is COVID-19. Even though the majority of government agencies and corporations refuse to acknowledge the pandemic is still a thing, SARS-CoV-2 is still out there and creating more variants than there are metal music subgenres. Let's take a look at the current numbers for the World Health Organization. Can you make that full screen? What's going on? Did we put up the wrong stats?
No, not exactly.
Then what? Reveal your secrets!
Does the haunted apocalypse and the cyborg child of hope mean anything to you?
Christ, I was hammered when I wrote that. I thought I got rid of it.
So was that before or after you got ass-pregnated?
I think it's beautiful. I really feel that pathos.
Really?
In my butt.
All right. Can we please get the correct Who graphic stats up for the love of Crom? Thank you. All right, marching forward. The current dominant strain of SARS-CoV-2 is XBB.1.5. It's a subvariant descended from Omicron. Let's learn more about it because knowledge is power, and the price of such power is Weltschmerz. This article by Sarah Berg, written for the American Medical Association's website, explains the basics of this variant and its genealogy, and being raised Mormon means I have a disconcerting fascination with genealogy. It's built into the trauma. That's a lot of text to go over, so instead of reading about its lineage verbatim, I have prepared this super professional chart for your viewing pleasure. No compromising screenshots or pics this time. I'm watching! Ooh, Kraken, a gigantic hentai factory conjured from the minds of seamen of yore, and also the most transmissible strain to hit the pandemic scene. It's more efficient and contagious than any previous variant. It's like the new variant is those psychopathic finance bros that have the opening Alec Baldwin speech from Glengarry Glen Ross as their phone's alarm clock tone. It doesn't want no fucking steak knives. It wants a whole pot of coffee. The name Kraken was derived from T. Ryan Gregory, an evolutionary biologist at Canada's University of Guelph? Something. Gregory is part of a ragtag group of scientists who decided to start a new naming convention for the subvariants that were too cool and underground for a mainstream Greek letter from the WHO. So on October 28th, 2022, Gregory published this informal list on Twitter. As we can see, Kraken hadn't hit the scene yet. This was done in an attempt to make it easier for the media to report on these subvariant strains as they ebb and flow through global populations. The Kraken, or XBB.1.5, gets its lettered and numbered designation from the Pango naming system. From the Atlantic. The official names for variants and subvariants, names such as SARS-CoV-2 B1.1.7, come from the Pango naming system, which was fashioned by evolutionary biologists in the early months of the pandemic to standardize variant naming practices. As baffling as they can seem, they follow a clear logic. Under the system, B refers to a particular COVID lineage. B.1 refers to the sublineage of B lineage. B.1.1 refers to the first sublineage of the B.1 sublineage, and so on. When the names get too long, a letter replaces a string of numbers. B.1.1.529.1, for example, becomes BA.1. Okay, that was boring and tedious. It was like reading one of those insufferably long lineage passages out of the Old Testament. And Ham Hock begot pork chop, and pork chop begot sausage roll, and sausage roll begot moons over my hammy. And yolk did runneth down through my beard, and yea, unto mine shirt. Boy, am I hungry. Anyway, I see why old T. Ryan Gregory and company decided to go on with cool fantasy monster names instead. I hope in the near future we see names like Balrog, Demilich, or Timet. It would be pretty metal if slain by the Tarask was engraved on my headstone. So, what is the severity of the Kraken? According to the AMA and Yale Medicine, it appears the severity of this subvariant isn't any worse than previous iterations of Omicron. Vaccines and the subsequent boosters seem to have been helping limit its impact. Also, as far as people in the United States goes, perhaps there is some level of lingering immunity due to vaccines and or prior infections. XBB.1.5 can still be harsh, especially on those who have not been vaccinated, the immunocompromised, the elderly, and those with certain medical conditions that may make them more susceptible to its effects. As with previous strains, the AMA article noted that XBB.1.5 tends to remain in the upper respiratory tract and doesn't hunker down deep in the lungs like previous variants had a habit of doing. But, of course, it's still early and more research and data needs to be compiled before anything definitive can be claimed. Do yourself a favor. If you haven't gotten around to it yet, get that bivalent booster while it's still available for free. Oh, what do you mean while it's still free? I hear you asking. Well, because there's no such thing as national Adderall. The Biden administration is ending the last vestiges of the COVID emergency declarations in May. More on that later. But yeah. Hey, yeah. We know. Past me didn't know that things would be accelerated. So we'll be addressing that a little later in the episode. So we'll see you then. The new boosters help with the Kraken, according to CDC research presented in this article from January 25th, 2023. From the NBC News article, quote, the updated COVID boosters reduce the risk of COVID infection from the predominant Omicron subvariant by nearly half, according to early data published Wednesday by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In adults up to age 49, the latest boosters from Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna were 48% effective against symptomatic infection from the XBB.1.5 subvariant, the news report said. As of January 21st, that subvariant accounted for about 1 in 2 new cases in the US, close quote. The article goes on to explain that during the summer of 2022, the bivalent booster was tinkered with, a very legit sciencey term first coined by totally actual science person Tinkerson von Tinkerton III in 1890 whatever, to better handle the Omicron subvariants BA.4 and BA.5, along with the original strain of the coronavirus that was identified in Wuhan, China in 2019. According to information we got from the CDC website, only 16.3% of the total US population have received the bivalent booster as of March 8th, 2023. The original XBB strain was first discovered in India in August of last year. It didn't take long for it to become the dominant strain in India and Singapore. Since then, it has evolved subvariants like XBB.1 and XBB.1.5, the Kraken. On January 17th, 2023, PBS NewsHour reported that XBB.1.5 had become the big swinging dick on the scene and had spread to at least 38 countries with a heavy presence in the United States, which at the time accounted for 43% of the COVID-19 cases worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. And New England accounted for over 70% of US cases. Earlier, I mentioned that XBB.1.5 is shown to be highly immune evasive thanks to new upgrades found in the latest COVID-19 patch. This article from Scientific America, dated January 10th of this year, explains why, in a layperson-friendly fashion, without using terms like titers or homologous or human angiotensin converting enzyme III, the parent variant of Kraken XBB evades our immune system by employing a mutation found on its spike protein, the pokey out bits that look like a weather-worn lawn dart you found behind the shed. That spike protein mutation site is known as 486. 486 gifted XBB like a +3 to its stealth check rolls when giving our immune system the slip. And yes, we will be continuing to fall back on tabletop RPG analogies because RPGs are applicable in every situation. Do not question me! Anyway, back to the topic. To quote again from the article, because I know how much our viewers get off on that, quote, Lawrence Young, a professor of molecular oncology at the University of Warwick Medical School in England, described the mutation as an evolutionary trade-off. It provides for more immune evasiveness, but it is a trade-off in terms of infectivity, that the change makes the virus slightly less efficient for infection, he says. By contrast, XBB.1.5's defining feature and its main difference from XBB is a spike protein mutation known as Ep.5. This mutation gives XBB.1.5 a significant advantage, boosting infectivity while retaining XBB's ability to sneak past human defenses. In other words, it's less of a trade-off and more of a turbocharge, close quote. Basically, if the tagline from 1985's Jim Cotta became a virus. And the article mentions that the mechanism for the enhanced transmissibility isn't yet known, but they do know that the aforementioned F486P mutation not only gives the Kraken some zhuzh, but also lets it roll with advantage when binding to our body's ACE2 receptors, the doorway through which the virus gets into cells in our noses, throats, and lungs, according to Professor Lawrence Young there in the Scientific American article. Alright, moving on from the Kraken. Let's go over what happened with China's recent awful COVID surge. In late November 2022, reports started to come out that protests were happening in various cities throughout China in response to roughly 3 years of strict COVID-19 protocols and restrictions. The catalyst for the protest stemmed from the tragic fire in an apartment building late on Thursday, November 24th, killing 10 people and injuring 9. This occurred in China's Xinjiang region in the city of Urumqi. This specific region had been under strict lockdowns for over 3 months as part of the zero COVID policy. Videos taken during the fire showed the difficulties the fire department had getting through the physical barriers that had been constructed as part of the pandemic control protocol. These videos kicked off the protests. This CNN article, dated December 3rd, 2022, provided this handy map of various protests that were happening around China at this time. 28 protests over 19 cities. On December 7th, China's National Health Commission loosened the country's COVID-19 restrictions. By late December 2022, Reuters reported that the UK-based health data firm Airfinity estimated that more than 5,000 people were dying from COVID each day. A week later, Airfinity estimated the daily COVID death toll was around 9,000 because, COVID is apparently a huge overachiever with deep-seated insecurities, probably a result of being raised by an emotionally distant father virus who never thought COVID would amount to anything. The surge was brutal and relentless. Articles kept coming out about how China's ICUs were flooded with patients and their crematoriums were packed. Not unlike the grim situation in New York City at the start of the pandemic, when media coverage flooded our screens regarding NYC's overwhelmed crematoriums working overtime due to the startling daily death toll and the large trailers parked outside of funeral homes that were converted into refrigeration units to house bodies. Or early 2021, when Los Angeles was grappling with a particularly ruthless COVID scourge, had to lift the air quality cremation limits because, like New York City, they were flooded with the dead. But back to the sadness in China. By mid-January 2023, reports started coming out that the outbreak had peaked and an estimated 60,000 lives had been lost to COVID-19. By month's end, officials in China reported that the deadly COVID wave was finally coming to an end. On February 8th of this year, a Chinese-funded study was posted to The Lancet, a 200-year-old medical journal, that fortunately, no new variants came out of the COVID wave. From the article, of 413 sampled infections in Beijing, all belonged to existing COVID variants. The most common were Omicron subvariants BA.5.2 and BF.7, which together accounted for more than 90% of local infections. The samples were randomly selected for genomic sequencing from a large group of 2,881 high-quality samples collected in Beijing from November 14th to December 20th, 2022. Close quote. So, yay, I guess. One wispy pube of good news that came from the angry, veiny shaft of misfortune that fucked over the Chinese people. Obviously, the last thing the world needs are more COVID-19 variants and subvariants. Getting reinfected with COVID is one of those things that help develop more of these deadly monsters. And we need new variants, like comedy clubs need more stool-humping edgelord open micers with hot takes about pronouns and cancel culture. Speaking of canceling things, let's get back to that thing I said earlier about the COVID protections. On Monday, January 30th of this year, Biden gave Congress a heads up that his administration will be ending the twin national COVID emergency protocol thingies on May 11th. You may remember that 3 years ago, almost to the day of Biden's aforementioned announcement, Alex Azar, who was President Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary, declared that the COVID-19 pandemic was a national emergency, with Trump in March 2020 officially concurred with Azar that yes, this is indeed an emergency of the national kind. Since then, these emergencies have been extended a few times. What does this mean for us? This LA Times opinion piece by Wendy Netter Epstein, she's definitely heard all the jokes, people, not going there, and Daniel Goldberg from February 16 does a pretty fair job of answering that question. It's not going to be great for most Americans, but especially hard for anyone not white, the poor, the undocumented, and those uninsured, And there is a lot of overlap there because capitalism has the wettest underwear for inequality/racism, like soaked through, running down the legs in viscous, sticky rivulets of greedy, horned up, lube-coated oppression, quivering with each step as the vibrating butt plug of white supremacy works its way deeper with each jackbooted step.
Nick, we get it.
Right. Yes.
I mean, sorry, it sounded hot in the worst imaginable way possible, but, we have a timetable to keep here.
Point received. Going forward. From the LA Times opinion piece, quote, historians have long pointed out that pandemics tend to reveal social inequalities and often make them worse, as we have seen with COVID. Studies show that people in areas of social disadvantage have died from COVID at higher rates than those in affluent areas. After controlling for differences in age, people of color have contracted COVID at higher rates and have died at higher rates than white people, close quote. So to make things less brutal during the pandemic, the Biden admin, Congress, and some states decided to roll out some helpful policies like free or almost free access to COVID testing, treatments, and vaccines for most Americans. The ACA subsidies for exchange policies were expanded. They had temporary Medicaid coverage for the uninsured in 15 states, and this was important, not doing the dick move of kicking people off of Medicaid across all the states during the public health emergency. And, direct quote, between February 2020 and March 2021, at least 13 million additional people enrolled and stayed in Medicaid. All good stuff, right? When May 11th rolls around, all that shit is gone. Well, hey, it's future NDS again. Don't blame past me. He, didn't know that the process was sped up by a whole month. Don't worry. We both wrap ourselves in the cold gray blanket of pessimism for comfort, so past me wasn't remotely surprised. But, on April 10th of this year, NBC threw this shit up on their website, letting us know that despite Biden's pretend opposition to ending it early, because he already announced that they were going to do that shit anyway, he said he wouldn't veto the GOP-led measure. So, here we are, yeah. Another win for the capitalist machine. And just a completely unrelated topic change. Did you know there are instructions available online at places that teach, how to construct a guillotine? Just throwing that out there, in case you want to really deck out your yard for Halloween, or maybe for a school history project. Maybe you need it for your indie horror film. Who knows? Anyway, back to being the past. No more free COVID test kits. Want a vaccine or booster against COVID-19? Gonna need to get your private insurance to pay for that, as long as you got it from an in-network provider, because Pfizer, Moderna, et al. Are taking their vaccines to the commercial market this summer. If you're uninsured, like me, COVID shots are coming out of your well-worn Jack Skellington wallet your once girlfriend gave you for Christmas years ago, and you should have discarded it and obtained a new one, but you're a sentimental marshmallowy creature, and your beleaguered, haunted eyes well up every time you think of chucking it in the trash. Until very recently, at least, I had the protection of the Federal Uninsured Fund, a modest $25 billion or so that was paid out to healthcare providers to cover the cost of treating, vaccinating, and testing all things COVID during the pandemic. But that has pretty much lapsed, despite the White House's efforts to convince the Republicans to pour a little more juice into it in November, but we all know how that went, so fuck them. But also, fuck Joe Biden for crowing about how the pandemic is over back in September 2022. If you need more funding for a thing, don't say that thing has been defeated where Republican ears can eat your mouth sounds and store them in their thinky puddings for later. Granted, they would have probably told the White House to lick their clammy taints anyway, but you don't need to give them help, Joe. Jesus Christ! And that continuous enrollment for Medicaid that's been going on during the pandemic, well, that shit went away on March 31st, and states on April 1st were allowed to start the process of unenrolling folks, and then those same people will have to sign up again to maybe hopefully renew their coverage. Take this article from NPR dated January 24th of this year. In this block of text next to me, NPR explains that during the last 3 years, the number of Americans that signed up for Medicaid and CHIP inflated like my breasts when apex predators or flat earthers are near, to 90.9 million, which was an increase of 20 million. NPR reports that between 5 to 14 million Americans could lose their Medicaid coverage. That number comes from the Kaiser Family Foundation, a nonpartisan health organization. Quick aside, some estimates I have read crank that number up to 18 million. The 6.8 million number in the headline is an estimate from the Federal Health and Human Services Department based on historic trends, but nobody is exactly sure how many people will be kicked off because it will vary from state to state based on whatever parameters they will employ, what obstacles they put in the way, and how many mean-spirited assholes are in power there. Oh, did you want that in percentages? Well, you're in luck because Forbes has you covered with their equally depressing article pulling from the Kaiser Family Foundation's research on this issue. And I doth quote, 1/3 of states that were able to report projected coverage losses estimate that about 18% of Medicaid enrollees will be disenrolled after the continuous enrollment provision ends, Kaiser said. The estimates range from 7% to 33% of total enrollees and are consistent with other estimates that about 15 million people may lose Medicaid coverage over the coming year. And apparently this wonderful process will take about 12 to 14 months depending on the state. Going back to the LA Times op-ed I referenced earlier, it's going to suck extra sour frog ass for our vulnerable minority communities with the eradication of all these pandemic safety nets. Let's break it down from the wall of text next to me from the piece. First, no access to COVID care for the uninsured and undocumented people, almost half of whom, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, are uninsured. As we went over earlier, this means the loss of free testing kits and no more money for hospital reimbursements for treating COVID for those without insurance. Second, and we all know this, COVID's not going anywhere, and it's going to keep on keeping on, increasing the workforce shortages due to death and also disability caused by long COVID. Long COVID, which we'll really dig into next episode, also means more people having to quit their jobs to stay home and take care of family members severely affected by it. Third, with the loss of Medicaid eligibility, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services predicts that people of color are much more likely to lose coverage based on administrative hurdles alone, even if they remain eligible for Medicaid. Fourth, with this change happening to so many so quickly, it's going to apply more stress to our beleaguered hospital workers and system, like even more stress than I put on my 14-year-old penis when I discovered that laying on my boner felt amazing and didn't technically count as masturbation because I wasn't using my hand. Ha! You thought I was gonna go with a fat joke, didn't ya? Fuck you, you fat-phobic assholes. Pew 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 pew. Anyway, continuing on. The loss of Medicaid will mean limited access to vital screenings and treatment for chronic disease, as well as an increasing emergency department use and medical debt for low-income Americans. Black and Hispanic people are twice as likely as white people to be enrolled in Medicaid and more likely to be directly impacted. Close quote. Imagine having debilitating mental illness, and the only thing keeping you grounded are your psych meds, and not being able to afford them anymore because you lost your Medicaid, or your insulin, or blood pressure meds, or your oxygen tanks, or hospice care, or any of the multitudinous things millions rely on to survive each and every day on this merciless spinning space rock. We're going to lose people because of our federal government's callous disregard for its poor, desperate, and vulnerable denizens. And just like with the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that overturned abortion rights, it's going to once again fall to individual states to either help or hinder. Like in Colorado, who stepped up in November 2022 and swung the doors of enrollment wide open for a program called Omni Salud. It helps undocumented residents and individuals with protections via the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program to get in on that affordable healthcare insurance action through the state's marketplace. 10,000 Coloradians had enrolled by January. Rhode Island is getting a program together to automatically enroll those who lose Medicaid during the Great Unwinding into a marketplace plan. Maryland is going to get in touch with their residents who are no longer eligible for Medicaid to assist them with enrolling in a qualified health plan. Before we close out the show tonight, we have a special treat for our viewers, an interview with the one and only SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. Very excited to be here.
We're happy to have you.
I'm actually really nervous. I haven't been interviewed in almost 2 years.
Well, I guess we'll start with how have you been?
I'll be honest, the divorce was pretty hard. But no one really actually talks about that. It's totally fine. They usually just go straight to the pandemic, but not everything is about me, so back to you.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. First, I wanted to...
I'm sorry. Can we just... Never mind. Fine.
No, what is it?
I don't want to get into it, but like, the mask.
Well, I mean, no offense, but I'm just trying to be safe and protect myself. I'm sitting next to a deadly infectious virus. Again, no offense, but not to split hairs, you have killed over 1 million of my fellow Americans.
Stop. Deadly? You mean it? Like, you're so sweet. I guess I understand. I mean, I'm good at my job.
Even though governments and the financial sector has chosen to ignore you, you're still being discussed online. In fact, on Twitter, hashtag COVID's not gone has been trending, especially with what recently took place in China and the new subvariant, the Kraken, leading with global infection rates. What can we expect from you in the future?
I'll tell you, Nick. COVID is definitely not gone. I am here and ready to just be seen again, okay? I don't like to call it a subvariant as much as I like to call it rebranding, if you will. The world we live in just doesn't have the attention span that people say 1918 did. So I really have to keep up with the new and improved expectations of me. And I'll tell ya, with 6 kids and a worldwide business to run, it is so stressful.
Well, not to add to it, but how do you feel about the rise of the avian flu strain H5N1 that has been decimating wild bird populations in the poultry industry and has been infecting other species like foxes, ferrets, sea lions, etc. This is scientists worry that it may develop the ability to infect human populations and could be potentially far more destructive than COVID.
I'm just gonna say it. The monkeys were good, but the Beatles were better. Am I right? The Beatles were so much better, okay? No one does it like me, Nick. This isn't a race, okay? It's a marathon. And it's wonderful to hear that you're just starting. I wish you all the best. But I'm out here on mile 13 with a margarita in my hand, right? Am I right? Not even worried, Nick. Not even worried. Catch me outside. How about that? You remember her? Oh my God, she was so funny.
Yes, very delightful. So, how about these zombie viruses that have been discovered in the melting permafrost? Apparently they're still alive and kicking and haven't been on this earth for thousands of years. Again, another potential existential threat looming on the horizon.
Nick, people have been trying to do what I've done for centuries. I've built an empire here. I've run the world for the last 3 years. I'm being the most trending hashtag since March of 2020 through 2023, only to be beat out by hashtag Pedro Pascale. And honestly, I get it. Have you seen him? Damn. Daddy.
Have you thought about a collaboration with future outbreaks?
Oh my god, yes. Me and swine flu have been really trying to get something in the works. RSV and I have a clothing line coming out soon called Breathtaking. And I'm actually just met with Jeffree Star and HPV about a makeup line. Very excited for the future.
How do you feel about all the death you caused?
Listen, Nick, I didn't go after anybody that didn't have it coming. I had a mission, and I feel like I did some good. Social Security was taking a hit. I got rid of your old. Homeless was rampant in New York City. Bam! Mass graves. Obesity was a growing concern. Hashtag lighten the load. I made people quit smoking, doubt the government, and cut ties due to political beliefs. Humanity has never been better, Nick. And you're welcome.
Yeah, well, we got vaccines and boosters, so there.
Oh my god. You took that? You know that Fauci just did that to make money, right? Nick, you don't need vaccines. You need guns. I shouldn't talk about this, but there has been talks of the next rebranding. Zombies. Hashtag Last of Us. Hashtag Call Me Pedro.
Alright, well, on that hopeful note, myself and this spray of COVID be gone, think it's time for you to leave.
Thank you so much for having me. What the fuck?
You're not dead. Why are you not dead?
I'll never be gone, baby. You can never get rid of me. We are Legion.
God damn it! I need backup! Yeah, we did it! Beer's on me! All right, folks, that's our show for tonight. We're coming back very soon with part 2 of Nightmare on Corona Street, where we will be talking about long COVID. Good night. Teaching the masses about collide. Ooh. Nikki, you're working hard. You're tired. I think it's time for a little nose candy pick-me-up.
Oh. Then Beatty is like, you might just be right, mister, and... Do you hear that sucking sound?
Sounds like Nick found the little present I left for him.
Coke?
It's powdered sugar. It gets him every time.